Warning: the following video will discuss and contain subject matters relating to and including bullying, abusive relationships, self-terminating thoughts and actions, poor mental health including clinical depression and talks of serious mental issues, and diving into some personal details. This will be the sole video on this channel that will concern this topic. What are people supposed to live for? We're all told that we must live for others, but what happens when that reason to go on turns into a reason to let go? What is the man to do who has not been given the chance to feel that sense of connection? This kind of question can only lead to one feeling. It's something that this modern society we all live within all asks of us. Is it really worth going on? Some will find connection firm and true. Others will waste their days with simple pleasures. Some will pursue wealth. Others, degeneracy. For me, it all came down to a video game at the end of a long nightmare. It's silly, but it's all true. Allow me to share with you a very long story from my youth. We Xenoblade fans have come together to celebrate the freedom from the confines of the Wii U that Xenoblade X is going to very shortly experience. That game is connected to one of the most winding and painful series of events in my young life. It ultimately saved me, both in my life as a gamer and in a very literal sort of sense. I'm going to take this from the beginning to the end. This is, once again, a long story, so strap in. This video will primarily be segmented into two parts. The first half will be recounting my personal story. It'll be a series of things that I personally experienced. Xenoblade X will only come up as it is chronologically relevant to do so within that part. The second half will then primarily speak of Xenoblade X, and how it was there at a key point in my life, and what elements about it stood out to me and still stand out to this day. I do recommend watching both, as the first part will inform you of the mindset and state that I was in when I did get to play. The second half will be about how I received help. Now, let's get started. Today, all the people I know in my life identify me as the biggest Xenoblade fan that they each individually know. It's my #1 gaming franchise. And it's the thing that I am the most associated with, at least as it pertains to my online presence. That wasn't always the case. I used to be a Nintendo normie, for lack of a better term. You know the ones. The guys that only play the same 4 franchises and rarely, if ever, branch out. That changed in 2012 and 13 when I became aware of Operation Rainfall, and then I was introduced for the first time to proper JRPGs. I had played Pokemon and Mario and Luigi before, but this was new. This was special. When the credits rolled in Xenoblade 1 for the first time, it had become my favorite game of all time, unseating Mario Galaxy from its throne, which it had held for a long time at that point. And to see at the other end of this, the Monolith Soft X E3 2013 trailer, it was something I watched at least 100 times, even showing it to friends who I knew would think that it would look cool, but were unwilling to cough up the cash for the Wii U to play it, albeit for justifiable reasons. I spent that entire summer saving and working for the chance to get a Wii U, with hope in my young heart that the wonderful games that I was about to experience would move me. What I found at the end wasn't what I could have ever realistically imagined. When I bought the Wii U, I had no idea what its real features were, what kind of experience it was going to have, or what the future held in store. What I did know was that I was here to have a fun time. You see, I never really was that much of a sociable person as I was growing up. I was in high school at the time, but that was okay. To me, the people that were close were the only ones that really mattered, regardless of how much of an asshole people could be in the general day-to-day grind. It was okay so long as I had games to dive into at the end of a long day. By early 2014, I had arrived. What I found would begin a process that would change my life forever. Today, Miiverse is remembered as an odd experiment gone horribly, horribly wrong. An anecdotal, you just had to be there kind of experience. another big bump in the long road Nintendo has walked. But for those who were there at the time, who were old enough to understand how to interact in a social environment, but weren't old enough to recognize the absurdity of using services like this as opposed to literally anything else, it was a gateway that you might say led to an entirely new world. As a 15-year-old, I would make my way to make my first online friends and connections on this terrible, terrible, stupid service with next to no privacy whatsoever. I wasn't going to join Facebook, but Nintendo managed to successfully reel me in. I became Space King, a veil I sit behind to this day. Life went on. I got new games, I met new people, and at the end of the tunnel, near the halfway point through the end of 2014, I had identified one person in particular who was kind of special. Today that person goes by the name Rito, but at the time they were Icarus. I was always aware of what was going on in their life, and it was the first online connection that meant anything to me. Though we were separated by a vast distance, it felt as though they had truly become a part of my life, so that made it harder to swallow when they were swept up in a wave of drama that had pushed them to their mental edge. Exit Rito, enter K. K was not this person's username, but for the duration of the video, I'm going to refer to this person as such, and I will do so only using letters to indicate other people. Yes, I recognize that it is extremely silly for a Xenoblade fan to use letters to represent people. Hardy har har, I know. But I really do want to conceal names, and it's important for the sake of preventing any sort of drama. The trail on all of this has gone cold for a very long time, and I have zero intention of stirring up any drama from a decade removed from those events. Moving on with this nomenclature, K was an artist, which, we're a dime a dozen on Miiverse. But this person was deeply, deeply disturbed. They were in a state of severe mental trauma. They were a victim of an abusive household, and they expressed this in deeply disturbed and uncomfortable, bleak drawings. Rito was their only solid friend at the time, and they were the sole person who was capable of understanding the meaning behind these works. It was stressful. It was too stressful for my friend to process, and so his parents would ultimately intervene, locking down the Wii U for the holiday season. But not before telling me, another friend I'll call C, another I shall call D, that it was up to me, as well as them, to pick up where Rito had left off, to look after them, to make sure that they didn't give up in the face of the demons that they lived with, to not allow them to do something that, as Rito stated, would be really, really stupid. But when Rito vanished, so did K. It was December 2014, and both were now gone. I'd assumed that I'd failed before this quest even really began, and so I dived headfirst into the games of the time period. Bayonetta 2, Smash 4. I was having fun. I wasn't concerning myself with what came next. It was out of my hands as far as I could tell. That was until D, scrolling the Miiverse YouTube community, in a stroke of 1 in 1 billion odds dumb luck, found an alt which had no doubt belonged to K. Not only that, but they found that they had made a friend. More than that, K actually ended up confessing feelings of attachment to this other individual, Nana. It looked like things were going to aim upwards, but that soon became clear that it wasn't going to be the case. The Ven art continued, a self-terminating dialogue from them had begun, and by then, early 2015, Miiverse was starting to crumble. Moderation had pulled the leash tighter, likely in response to the influx of Nintendo 3DS users. The community had had its ups and downs, but I couldn't help myself from getting involved. I wanted to be there because Rito, because it felt like it was the right thing to do. I gradually began to ignore my own feelings, and reading those posts, they just took my breath away and made me feel what I could only describe as just a vast, dark emptiness which consumed my mind. I was afraid that I'd send a message one day and never get a response back, like Rito, but with vastly darker implications. So fast forward to April, and it's been decided we're going to move our community from Miiverse to Twitter, as the administration was too wicked to bear. Combine that with the new rule of 30 posts max per day, and it wasn't something that any of us could really withstand any longer. And Twitter had a messaging system that would allow us to effectively reboot from where we started. That takes me to a fateful summer day in May of 2015, when I messaged Kay all day long, trying to get the full scope of their problems. Information that had been carefully hidden and obscured by the veil of childishness that we had to engage in when we waded through Miiverse, trying to understand what was wrong and why they felt the way that they did at the time. And I was told at one point to stop prying, but I allowed them a space to vent off steam. At one point they talked to me flat out about self-termination, as they felt that the problems that they had were intrinsically unavoidable. I talked them down somehow or another, but if I'm being honest, I don't even really remember how I pulled it off. They were gone for a few days after that, and when they returned, they were acting strange, writing cryptic messages on both Twitter and Miiverse. I would find out from Nana that Kay had said something very strange pertaining to me in specific, so that evening I went ahead and spoke with them directly, where I was hit with probably the last thing that I could have ever realistically expected. That they had somehow grown feelings for me as well. I'd imagine likely down to the effort that I was putting in to try and keep them around, but this put me in a very strange position. Unfortunately, as Nana was already Kay's partner, and I didn't want to hurt them, I had to decide I could accept, despite not even really feeling that way for the most part, or I could deny and likely hurt them beyond repair. I sat in my bed for hours, thinking, and I made the wrong decision. I returned those feelings, and from that point onwards, they were my partner. And concerning the other party, an agreement was reached to enter a polydynamic, which was something I wasn't even aware had existed beforehand at the time. It was May the 10th, 2015. The saddest summer vacation of my life was soon to begin. Processing it all the next day, it felt like I had gone to bed and woke up in a dream. I went to high school and I didn't process all of the next day, anything that was going on. Nothing. Everything went in one ear and it went out the other. That's how everything around me went. I decided how I felt in this matter didn't really matter anymore. What mattered was that they were happy, and that I was fulfilling the obligation that I was left with by my dear friend. The early days were awkward and deeply misguided. I made big mistakes. I said things that I probably shouldn't have said. I did things that were confusing. Because I was confused, and I wasn't sure of what it was that I really even wanted anymore. Over the process of this, I had somehow fallen out of touch with myself, with my own feelings. The last day of the class was May the 22nd, so I was free just in time for the new excitement. Splatoon 1 was set to arrive May the 29th, 2015, my 16th birthday. Naturally, being a Nintendo fan, I was more than aware of it, having been excited for the game all year, watching that direct that was released. I had everything set to go. I got to go to GameStop. I picked it up. They even had the amiibo, which they went out of the way to supply. I logged into Twitter the following morning to find that in my absence, as I played the game throughout my birthday, everything caught fire. I was told that I, as a 16-year-old boy at the time, who was simply excited to play a video game, was selfish for feeling that way. That I didn't have the right to feel that way, because they couldn't join in. And because I should have been there that day to hear about their problems. And you know what the worst part is? I believed it. I was sorry for something that wasn't even worthy of an apology. It's like I said, my own feelings just didn't matter anymore. And this would become my way of life, slowly but surely. All the things that I did love, that I did truly enjoy, they were downplayed, and many were treated with scorn. That included Xenoblade Chronicles X. During E3 2014, Nintendo had uploaded long videos showing gameplay of the beginning of the experience, and I remember being helplessly excited for the game back then. I watched every single one of those videos, despite even having largely similar material each time, and you bet your ass that I was going to do the exact same. for X in 2015, but I was not afforded the chance. My time was to be funneled into this person only. And games weren't the sole extent of it. The same went for my interest in anime. I was an avid watcher of Toonami every weekend to keep caught up on the shows that were in rotation, especially One Piece, which is a life passion of mine. But that was frowned upon as well. I was to watch what they wanted, when they wanted. I was to spend that time only with them. And that created a rift between me and that interest in anime. And if I'm being honest, it's one of those things that just hasn't fully healed even today. Kate had tried to get me to play something, though. Something that they wanted, and I was largely indifferent to. Fantasy Life for the 3DS, an action RPG by level 5. It was out of my wheelhouse at the time. But I just wanted to enjoy something, so I put up with playing it, despite not really connecting. Just because I thought that it would make them happy. Story details kind of went in one ear and out the other, and it really wasn't that engaging if I'm being honest. But I just did it because I thought I would make them happy. But to make me feel worse, I suppose, I was routinely quizzed about the game, and told that if I wasn't paying attention like Nana was, that I might as well have been worthless to them, even as we played online. Practical jokes and, screwing around is kind of part of the multiplayer experience. But whenever I engaged in something along those lines in the game, suddenly it was a massive controversy. Minor plot misunderstandings were construed to being that I was being a dismissive jerk, and by the end of June, I just stopped playing games in general. It felt wrong to do so. Nasty. Anytime that I wasn't spending with them as they wanted me to, it was deemed taboo. I effectively lost a whole summer vacation due to this. My routine became log into Twitter, wait for Kay to join after their work shift, and then get yelled at for minor problems that were being blown severely out of proportion, which I would profusely apologize for before it all repeated on the very next day. The only time I felt that I was allowed to use my video game consoles anymore was for Pokemon X and Y's terrible, terrible voice chat service, as well as the Wii U voice and video chat service, and this was the impact of my mistake. I lied about how I felt to pacify them, to meet the faint expectations of a person whom had exited my life half a year ago. I thought it was all my fault. I thought that I was doing a bad job. I was trying to play therapist without the first idea how on earth the brain actually works. I thought that if I just let it happen, if I just let myself take that mental and emotional beating, that it would mean that they would pull through. I was expected to just sit there and listen and accept the worst of it, even as things that came to light were legally or sometimes socially questionable. It was near the end of August that it came to light what it was that they were actually dealing with. And it was unbelievably so far out of my wheelhouse that it was effectively on a different planet, and I was mentally paralyzed. I will not share the condition that Kay suffered from, but needless to say, it was terrible, and their family only made it worse. And by that point, I realized that I wasn't suited for any of this, in any shape or form or fashion, for them to speak to or to address any of these profound issues. Kay took that in basically the worst way possible, to say that I was giving up on being a partner, that I didn't want to put up with them anymore. So they decided to vanish off the face of the web for a week, shortly before school was set to return. With my new stint at a technical school, they were apparently going with a friend on a trip, and they expected me to write down what was happening on the missing days in direct messages on Twitter. Before this all happened, they went about speaking to me in the worst way possible to convey the plans, keeping key details away from me and painting a picture that this was the end. I blew up their phone that night because they genuinely made it look like they were going to commit the deed. I only found out what was set up via prying. I held my end, I kept messages going, but it wasn't good enough. Turns out the trip was canceled and they just spent the week thinking, telling me the day before my first class that they hoped that I had a bad day and that I was worthless. I believed them. I believed everything I was being told. I fell into a pit of despair, filled with genuine self-hatred, angered by my inability to be the person that they needed. I was becoming someone that I hated with every fiber of my being. Got into class the first day of my new school. We were all to do introductions to one another. A name, a hobby, something about you. I said, "Hello, my name is..." redacted. I guess I like video games, not so sure anymore. And I am personally in severe need of relationship advice. I was in a room full of techno geeks, so I got a laugh out of the class. But in truth, I just felt like trash. I got home and I was told that I was going to be given one more chance. Whatever the hell that even meant at this point. I tried to keep the peace. I tried to stay quiet. I tried to meticulously follow every instruction that I was given. I even resolved to come up with a list of things that could be done so that we'd better be able to communicate, but it didn't matter. By this point, I had fallen so far that I was beginning to contemplate my own life, and whether or not I even genuinely deserve to continue to exist at this point. My battle with depression has been a long, long road, starting when I was about 11 years old, and this entire experience had made it unbelievably worse. This came up in conversation, and naturally it was spun that I was engaging in emotional manipulation as opposed to just being emotionally ravaged and beaten by that point. Around the time I just allowed my school performance to completely melt. I barely made C or D tier grades in that first semester, which just made me feel like I had lost my opportunity for my life to go the way that I wanted it to go, but I was literally incapable of performing well. I would get home from school, lay in bed, and stare at the ceiling for hours on end, unable to move, unable to motivate myself enough to do anything of substance, save for the occasional bathroom trip. Naturally, my homework suffered tremendously, as did any chance to build new social connections. In the world of the game that I was most excited for, however, Xenoblade X, it was now getting into the main swing of its marketing in America. I normally would have been there instantly, but I didn't care about anything. I didn't even care about the follow-up to my favorite piece of media in existence. That's how far down I was. And you might wonder what it was they were trying to accomplish, dictating what I could and couldn't do with my time and my hobbies. And to be perfectly honest, I have never put it all together myself. It's not like I didn't convey that these were passions to me. I did. I was just told that it was all wrong. I think it was just an element of control plus hatred towards me for my inability to fix all of their problems for them. Regardless, the effect that it had on me literally ruined almost everything that I had in my life at the time. Here we go. Out of the fire, into the damn sun. One day in mid-September, I got messages from them that suggested that they were going to go through with the threats of, well, you know, and that it was all my fault. Because I was apparently selfish. Because I didn't understand them. And I was forced to play my last resort card, seeking actual professional help. And that was the last straw for them. They were furious, but it did not matter. By this point, all that mattered was maintaining Rito's wish, keeping them tied down here somehow or another, even as I was faltering. That day, September the 24th, following a complete and total mental breakdown on my part, I undertook the first of 2 attempts that I had made to end it all over my long ride on this rock. I gazed into the darkness directly, and I had reached a conclusion. There was no path forward in my life. I had no friends that understood where I was. My parents were on a different planet from me, completely incapable of relating to anything I was going through. My school was largely indifferent, and there was no one I could run to. I no longer wanted anything anymore. I no longer felt anything but pain anymore. It was dumb luck, though, when I made it to the end of that night. So I made a decision. I went to Nana, and I told them that I wanted something that would last. I wanted our connection to last beyond this impending explosion. And my God, explode it did. September the 26th. Okay, it's rock bottom. They were cutting me out. They were trying to break our Twitter community apart. And they were trying to do petty things such as making an attempt to get me banned from Miiverse permanently by spam reporting so many accounts that it would lead to a console ban. It didn't matter to me anymore. They were still breeding by the end, whether they wanted to or not, although the same had somehow applied for me. Unfortunately, a lot of that immediate instant aftermath has started to become a blur for me over the years. Something positive did happen on the side, though. It was a path towards the future. Nana and I had become much closer. Something between the two of us started to bloom. Previously, they had been told that they were the good partner, yet they still often received just as much venom as me. And also, were just as obviously unqualified as me to handle any of the problems that were intrinsic to Kay's mind. What I can tell you is that I was sleepwalking my way through life at that point, and that I was spending some time with Nana, who'd finally gotten a Wii U console. We used it to chat. We'd used that for communication for several months before transitioning to Skype. I couldn't help myself. Unfortunately, reading their social media posts, which were often pertaining to how I was an evil person, I also found out that a Miiverse friend, G, had hidden something from me. An incident that was so important out of spite towards me specifically. You can kind of put two and two together there. And that weighed on my mind fiercely. I had felt a sense of profound emptiness. I didn't really care for the relationship element of the dynamic. What I felt was that I was a failure. Rito entrusted me with almost everything, and it felt like I had failed them. It was unforgivable as I viewed it. Though I had prevented the worst. What purpose did my life serve if I couldn't even honor the wishes of a single person? That question haunted me every waking moment, and as a result I began to suffer an existential crisis, and so I was dragged by them into that very same abyss. The hopelessness of the world, my inability to change a cruel turn of hand, and my perceived failure of the mission. I really and truly no longer wanted anything anymore. I didn't even have the will to get up in the morning. Not anymore. Having to be rattled into sleepwalking my way through the day by any means necessary. I didn't go to events for Halloween. I didn't pay attention to any game events. I had to be invited, basically by force, by the school Skype group for my class to watch that November's Nintendo Direct, during which I almost fell asleep. It was the same Direct they announced Cloud Strife for Smash Bros. I had forgotten almost everything that had mattered to me. I didn't, however, seek the end again, because by that point I think I realized that it would only hurt Nana. In retrospect, I'm able to explain why it is I didn't, but back then I just couldn't right then and there. And this is what I've realized. You see, the thing is about self-termination is that it's not a true solution to pain of the heart, because rather than rectifying that feeling, it instead ends up passed down the chain to someone else. Those who do care and love for you will in turn feel that pain, if not even worse. I couldn't identify a reason for my life to continue. I was at the brink. If any more time went without some sort of intervention, I might have very well made the attempt again. And it was there, at rock bottom, that a moment of healing would finally begin to play out. The light at the end of a long tunnel. And so we arrive at the bottom of the abyss, at the brink, staring into the darkness and seeing nothing but pain. Before we move on, I think that now is the appropriate time to answer a few questions that I know for a fact are going to get asked in the comment section if I do not go ahead and nail these out real quick. Number one, where was Rito in all of this? They were gone. They were never allowed onto the internet again by their parents, and they had to reestablish communications with me after the fact. Number two, are they aware of how much I went through? Yes, they are. They're sorry, but also not sorry in that they had to figure out their own personal situation, and I hold no grudges. Number 3, why did I put up with all of this? Well, it's the idea of this being a mission or a duty or something along those lines, which made me feel like I was responsible. This is just how I thought it was supposed to be when you have adult responsibilities. Number 4, why did I get so low that I took the course of actions that I did? Well, again, you need to understand that I am a person that has suffered with intense bouts of depression for very sizable chunks of my life. At that time, I was unmedicated, and what I needed was therapy myself, not to be forced to play therapist for someone else. I also had few friends at the time, and fewer still that I could trust, and nothing to look forward to in my life in that immediate future. And I was having serious trouble finding help with the family as well. So, in essence, I was trapped like a rat in a maze. I hope that clarifies at least a little bit of all of this. And if you're here a half hour into the video and you're still watching and you didn't just skip to the segment where I primarily talk about Xenoblade Chronicles X, I really do want to thank you because you just listened to the ramblings of the depressed story of a person on the internet that you barely know. You must be a deeply empathetic and kind person, and I thank you for listening to me. Now, if you skipped ahead, you're going to be in the circumstance where you're probably not going to understand some of the things that I'm saying, so I really do recommend seeing my points through and understanding the state of mind that I was in. But in any case, let's move on, shall we? It's been 12 pages of writing, and Xenoblade Chronicles X hasn't come up in a major fashion since the start, largely just existing as time markers in the progression of this nightmare at this point. I guess I remembered more than I thought that I did. I thought that prior to writing this, that I'd struggle to organize everything into a coherent timeline. But nope, thousands of words down on the script and it's not over. In any case, if it's not obvious by that point, gaming was the last thing that occurred to me anymore. How was I going to continue living my life? How was I going to move on with all that pain that ran all the way down to my soul? Was there any passion for anything left? I had taken up writing for a game concept early that year, and it's a concept that I'm still working on to this day, but it grinded to nothing during that ordeal. I had a passion for philosophy, which was derived from my interest in Xenoblade, and that also passed me by. I was an avid Nintendo fan, but I couldn't even muster up the strength necessary to buy Mario Maker, the brand new innovative Mario game. This is something that would have been completely unthinkable of me just a couple of years prior. But when you reach the bottom of the abyss, life has an interesting way of keeping things going, at least in my experience and the experiences of other people that I have witnessed. Life stops for no soul, and thankfully life had something else in store for me. It was a random conversation one night in late November when Nana brought up Xenoblade X again. Recalling that I had loved the first game, they were curious what I would think about the new game. It hadn't even occurred to me. The follow-up to my favorite game of all time was days away. In my mind, I still had that bottomless pit type feeling that I wasn't going to make it that much longer, that the pain would devour me before I could weather its storm. Sooner or later, and on a whim, I decided to go to the GameStop. They commented on how long it had been. That didn't really say much. I think they could sense that something was deeply wrong, but the man at the counter never really spoke up. If he did notice anything at all, that is. I put down a pre-order on the Xenoblade X Collector's Edition, and even the game guide. I figured, oh, what the hell? It's not like I care about money anymore anyways. If this is going to be it, then this might as well be the last time I'd have anything resembling fun. I might as well go out with that sense of completion. That was the genuine mindset. I was at the end of my rope, and although the worst had passed, I still hadn't crawled out of the pit just yet. That whim might very well have saved my life, and at bare minimum, it certainly saved my passion for games, and set the foundation for many of the most meaningful connections that exist within my life today. It was the start of a path that led towards healing. I got the game home, I installed the data packs, unwrapped the book, read the preamble by the author, and dived in. It was the closest experience that I've had in my life where I would describe what it must be like if you were asked what was going to be your final meal sitting as a death row inmate. That's genuinely what it felt like. So much had changed in that past year, especially within that 9-month time span. But when I got to that cliff in Primordia, seeing the wildlife, seeing the adventure that rested ahead, a feeling returned to me, which had been gone for a long time by that point. It was joy. I was actually enjoying something again. I was actually smiling, if only faintly. Across the gulf of time, across the gap between two games, across the pain that I was in, fun that was intrinsic to Xenoblade's core, the feelings that resonated with me so tremendously in my first go-around for this insane franchise, they were all still there. Yes, they existed in a new form. Yes, they weren't so quite as potent as the feelings experienced during that first playthrough of Xenoblade 1. Xenoblade 1 was a profoundly special experience a few years prior. It realigned most of my thoughts on how games could be, how they should be, and that would be a tough act to follow for, well, practically any piece of media, to be honest. Chasing the high that game made me feel has become a goal in my life in gaming. And perhaps more importantly, yes, I do have Nana, or rather my partner in life of 9 years and counting at the time of this writing, to help me for that safety net, to ground my sanity with in that time. You have them to thank for the wonderful thumbnail of our two characters and my skill overlooking NLA. I owe them thanks that are just as full as the ones that I offer towards Monolith Soft. Undoubtedly, we helped each other get through that nightmare, and hearing how much fun it was having, they followed suit and got the game as well. Kay was gone from our lives by then, and Nana was still in a lot of pain themselves, a pain that would take them a long time to work their way through. They had their own regrets and they made their own mistakes. I didn't focus on them throughout the duration of this video because this was my own perspective on things. They have their own story to tell. But make no mistake, Nana was going through just as much trouble as I was, if not more so in a few cases. After arriving at the cliffs of Primordia, it happened. I was playing for hours and hours. That first play session ran for 7 hours. At that point in time, it was the longest single day I'd spent playing a game in my young life. And good lord, did I need it. A lot of my fears and uncertainties were just meant to be shoved aside, if even only temporarily. By the end of that weekend, I'd racked up over 20 hours. That had to have been a record or something for me at the time. And that feeling continued onwards. Every day after class, I looked forward to playing more, to doing something that wasn't just brooding in my misery. I was crafting theories as I played, thinking about the many mysteries that surrounded Mira, and of obviously the incomplete scope of what was being depicted in the game's opening. I was exploring a vast land, and at times felt like I even actually somehow lived there in spirit. I wasn't playing a game, exploring a world, I was a citizen of New LA. I was someone who was tasked with the mission of taming the wildlands of Mira, and I became enraptured by Mira's magic. It was a home that existed far away from my real home. It felt real. It felt like where other players found frustration at the lack of clear answers to the game and its myriad mysteries, I found a personal sense of salvation. It was like medicine being administered towards my very soul. I was, for that time, a man of Planet Mira, and endlessly proud of that fact, helping out all the people, finding a sense of community. I put up with the game's very obtuse side quests with poor information distribution because I wanted to immerse myself. I was learning the life stories of the people who had lived there, and how tragedy often colored those experiences. It made me, for the first time in a long time, grateful to be alive. That sense of gratitude is the central linking feeling that, in my mind, connects the entire Xeno series together. To wake up in the morning after the credits rolled on one of these games, and to be enraptured by the experience that you had just had, that feeling marks the end of a truly special experience in my mind, and only a very small handful of games have ever replicated it. To be thankful for the gifts that the game itself had represented. I was without the promise of trying to help Kay, and without my dear friend Rito, but I was more free, more liberated than I had ever been over the course of what was practically my whole life. If you can see it, you can go there is a motto that we fans of this series use, but it's not more applicable to any other title in the series than this one. As I ran and jumped across the vast distances of Mira's landscape, I couldn't help but feel that at long last, that I was finally free. Free as a bird. To live, to laugh, to struggle, and to thrive. Of course, I was still a real person living in the real world, but I was able to live a life in another person's shoes, free to effectively reboot my life and try over again, banishing the worries that plagued my mind for a time. Xenoblade X became for me, at least temporarily, a new core, something that I could anchor my emotions around for the time being, as I more properly got a hold of myself in the real world. That process would be like an ongoing battle that would take a tremendous period of time to get through. But in the darkest hours, Xenoblade X shouldered me to that road that led to where I would ultimately end up. What brought me even closer to the game was that shared sense of tragedy I mentioned a moment ago. Xenoblade X is a brutal story, depicting a brutal struggle for humanity to survive. Many of the playable characters had lost humongous chunks of their families, their old lives, and obviously, in Earth, their home. Seeing these people endure and move forward past the point where they did, it was honestly kind of motivational. It made me feel like the problems I had could honestly be minimized in comparison. Of course, I know that depression is a serious matter. I needed professional help. I am not stupid. I recognize that fact. But here these people were who had lost literally everything but each other, and they were refusing, stubbornly, to go silently into the night. The cruel universe had forced them off the rock they called home for all of their lives. But they weren't going to die without having tried their damnedest to continue to survive. They understood the fragility of their current state very intimately. They understood the hostility of the universe and how it was more than willing to wipe them all out at the drop of a hat. That sort of endlessly nihilistic view would normally lead someone to think that it's all pointless. You would think that everyone in NLA would be deeply disturbed, deeply broken at a fundamental level, but they aren't, by and large part. They knew that they had to go on. They had to go on for the sake of those that they had lost. To make all the sacrifices up until this point worth it. They made alliances with other species, they gained tremendous, powerful allies, they fought tooth and nail for their right to survive, and they, thanks in no small part to my own assistance and my contribution, pulled it off. If they could pull all of that off, then why couldn't I? Getting to make my own character, and getting to insert myself into the narrative, some will call that a mistake. The argument often goes that, in video games, it's not optimal to have a game with a central narrative that is framed around a player-made avatar, as it allegedly damages the game's ability to weave a compelling narrative. That is true in some respects. It is difficult from a writing perspective to craft an interesting interaction and character development when the central POV character is a mute who responds with text boxes. But it's far from impossible. Many Western RPGs, the Soulsborne series, and titles like this prove that it's possible. Were it impossible, I probably wouldn't be making this video. I consider it one of the game's greatest triumphs. It allows you to imagine yourself as one of these people. No proper backstory means you can fill in the blanks however you want, and you'll be more or less correct. You can say anything happened, and it'll be the truth. It will be your truth. It will be your contribution to the cause. That which aids humanity's mission to struggle and to continue. So, I, for the first time ever in a game, truly imagined myself as that one on the screen. I'd never fully immersed myself in a narrative in this fashion before. It just hadn't happened before. It wasn't a case of not finding joy in stories. After all, Xenoblade 1 is obviously a much better story than this. The difference maker, though, is that immersion element, filling in my avatar's blank history with my own. It's one of the only times in a video game that I have ever done that. There are no rules. Cross is who you make of them. And for me, they were a representation of myself. If the mysteries of Mira weren't so compelling, if the world wasn't such an incredible place to explore, if the characters weren't as fun or as interesting as they were, then sure, it'd have been just another good JRPG. But that immersion that I felt, that elevated the entire experience into something deeply memorable. The existential crisis, which I had been dragging myself through, began to reach a breaking point. I needed to keep going, for the sake of the person that did love me, and for the sake of myself, so that I might achieve my own ambitions. Xenoblade X showed me that, and you know what? Maybe it was selfish to keep going on. I hadn't wanted to continue in this world anymore, having failed retail. But now, after that brutal year, I didn't want to go anymore either. Not without having achieved something. Not when I still had so much time left that was possible to reach out towards. Not when characters I grew attached to, who felt real to me, endured even worse. Over this process, I had lost everything but my life. But it was that continued life, that which was to be cherished. NLA's people fought that fight, to preserve the miracle of our own existence. If only vicariously through my avatar in its world, that included me too. They were fighting for a future for all of us, myself included. And when I had that realization, I ended up welling up and spilling tears at the end of this adventure. These people were, albeit unknowingly through the veil of our separate worlds, sincerely trying to help me all the same. When that all hit, it was like a wave of emotion washing over me. Feelings that weren't despair, for the first time in quite a long time. I was proud to serve under Elma, who was a fearless commander whom I could believe in. I was happy to know Lynn as a friend. I was myself again, able to roll my eyes at Tatsu's charades. My inquisitive edge had started to return as I was able to understand the depths of Lao's trauma and how he was a lot like myself in many respects. The mystery surrounding Elle's character had enraptured my mind in speculation. Irina and Gwen invoked in my mind the picture of those two kids that are the will they won't they guys. showing that just as much as things change, many things stay the same about our lives. Doug surprised the hell out of me at the end of this adventure, being subject of one of the most profound arguments in the series. A discussion that still captures my imagination to this day. I'm going to have to one day make a video discussing the most profound moments in the Xeno series. And believe me when I state this, that video is going to for certain contain the specific moment that I am alluding to, and in a high position too. That much is certain. And those are just the major characters. Everyone on Mira has a story to tell. Everyone had some sort of goal they were striving towards. Be it the simple goal to survive in this harsher environment, or something as meaningful as the objection to the state of things that Lao had. It's for this reason that the first run through Xenoblade X is something that I will never forget, for as long as my mind is sharp, and my will to continue is firm. As a mega fan of Xenoblade 1, I am honest in the fact that the game is not quite as magical as Xenoblade 1. The story of that first game is indeed timeless, and every bit as enrapturing today as it was the day it released. But Xenoblade X accomplished something different. It was aiming for something fundamentally dissimilar. Xenoblade X seeks to create community, a shared place to live, to occupy, a place in which you are able to leave your earthly problems behind at the door and engross yourself within a separate and fully realized world, complete with epic battles to engage in, vast places to explore, fun people to know and love, and deep mysteries to slowly unravel. It's for those reasons that this is the only game in the series with a degree of multiplayer. It's there to invoke community and connection, both within the confines of the game's central story, but also outside, through a cooperation and understanding of other players gained through the creation of a collaborative effort. Naturally, this game isn't perfect. I would never pretend that that's the case. It makes plenty of mistakes between serious quality of life issues, grinding being a slog, and the core story going largely unresolved, and it taking a really long time to get to the game's primary draw, the Skells. But it is not a failure. It succeeded in ways that the other Xeno games didn't. It succeeded in a way that I would say that very few games in general ever have. Its strengths greatly outweigh its individual weaknesses, and for that reason, that community that you engage within, that this game is elevated above, for me, above the mere status of a simple game. There's another vastly underappreciated element of the game, and one that leaves its mark on me to this day. Something that even as the game wrapped, I never stopped engaging with. I always kept coming back to this, and that interest was the music. The music is the subject of many a meme and disdain today on forums. You can Google worst video game music ever on forums like GameFAQs or Resetera and easily find people who will rush to post the music from this game. But I reject this notion. I have always done so. So many of the tracks are lyrical, they tell stories. Stories of people struggling to survive in the face of the immense cruelty of the vast universe and their current circumstances. There are genuine stories being told in these songs that are immediately relevant to what's going on within the game's central narrative. So much so that you can see that effect playing out in the new story content we're going to be getting in the DLC. These are stories that are relevant to the characters and towards this universe's lore, of how these people almost lost everything that someone could lose, and how at the end of this process they had to struggle to keep going on. They didn't get the chance to give up. Everyone they left behind on Earth, all the sacrifices that were made to get to this day, they couldn't just be left in vain. It would be tremendously selfish to give up at this point. You have to go on, or else it will make the sacrifices that came before meaningless. Although the people, they would complain, they would find immense difficulty, but they all eventually pulled through. It's for those reasons that I went through the obscenely difficult task of memorizing those songs' titles. Still listen to them today when I need a spark of some motivation. When I started college, I had to drive to class daily. Me and my friends burnt some CDs for me to listen on my commute time. Xenoblade X's soundtrack is on some of those discs. I've been listening to them for 7 years. I intend on buying the official OST someday. Today, Sawano is respected throughout the anime industry for the insane intensity and drama his songs evoke. I hope that with the impending re-release, Xenoblade X's songs will get some more of that same recognition. The game, and indeed the score, deserve it. And their tracks that are silly or off-putting, sure, fine. Maybe the NLA Night theme song doesn't really have the depth I've spoken of, but does that negate all the other things that the game does so well? No. Do I even remotely care? No. Because the songs that are there, the ones that are meant to represent and to mean something, they actually are great. Every single one of them lands. Every single one. I will not budge on this point. I will not falter, and I look forward to the new tracks, perhaps just as much as that new story detail. I am completely serious, and I feel that we are on the verge of a substantial realignment in how these songs are perceived. All of this would be good and well without solid gameplay to hook you. A great story, good immersion, huge world, good music, and great characters sadly don't always make for a great game. That has to be grounded around something that adds up in terms of gameplay. Gameplay is the king of a good game experience. That's how I've always felt ever since I was a small boy playing Mario Galaxy. So it's then the gameplay experience which elevates these into something greater than the sum of its parts. And Xenoblade X's gameplay hook is a gradually and exponentially increasing freedom that tracks throughout the experience. Every system in the game is designed in a sequential fashion, which gradually unlocks more and more freedom for the player. At the beginning, you have a massively higher degree of freedom than you did in Xenoblade 1. In Xenoblade 1, you walked and swam everywhere at a steady but calm pace. You died when you fell off a ledge, and platforming wasn't really a thing. Xenoblade X starts off by allowing you to run faster than ever, fall off huge distances, and jump like you're on the friggin' moon. Instantly, you feel more free and able to do things than you ever were in Xenoblade 1. Then you get your division, your class selection, your field skills, which has tangible progression for the RPG combat, culminating in you getting Overdrive, which when used correctly allows you to overcome vastly more powerful enemies, meaning that the restriction you previously had on some of the monsters being too strong, when you play the game correctly, that's not as massive a problem anymore. After that, you get your first Skell, which is capable of jumping dozens of times higher than you, is capable of fighting and squashing resistance from most weaker or smaller enemies, can go through water much faster than on foot, and can turn into a vehicle for even faster travel. This carries you on through, using probes and doing quests. You unlock financial freedom by having enough cash to get better Skells, which by extension makes combat encounters with stronger enemies even more feasible. This all culminates in the biggest, most impactful, most climactic sense of freedom that the game, and probably any game ever made, has to offer. After completing Chapter 9, and then with the prerequisites, you get the Skell Flight module, which officially removes any and all barriers to player freedom. Setting off from NLA towards the sky remains among the most jaw-dropping moments I have ever experienced in a video game. You go from running away from small enemies who outrun you and can easily kill you, to being capable of conquering the skies of Mira themselves. For myself and many other players, this gameplay loop of gradually unlocking more and more systems that build up towards total player freedom is the core experience. It's the loop that has kept the X portion of the community so attached and so in love with the game for so long. Many have said that it's like Zelda Breath of the Wild before that game was ever created, and I'm completely inclined to agree. And for it to land in a time of my life when I had personally been chained down so badly, chained to my grief, to my despair, the liberating feeling that X instills is one of the core factors that got me through one of the worst times of my life. The fun factor managed to distract away from some of that pain, but it was the feeling of liberation that really stuck me. In moments like these, it made me realize how important it is for someone to be the decider of their own freedom and of their own will. The next thing to talk about, I guess, would be how Mira itself plays into all of this. The game can be broadly thought of as being divided into two parts. There's NLA, which is the central town and hub for all of this relevant and important information. And then there's beyond the doors of NLA, the untamed world of Mira itself. And let me tell you, Mira is just as much a character as the characters themselves are. You'll become intimately aware of your own weakness as well as your ability to triumph as you struggle and contend to work your way back through this hostile land. Mira is a fierce place. Everything here outside of the walls of NLA wants you dead, including the alien faction that was responsible for the Earth's demise. It's extremely dangerous, but it's because of that extreme danger that it's tremendously memorable. You can die at a moment's notice in this game. If you just happen to bump into a tough enemy, there's a good chance that you're going to die. What this means is that you have to keep your guard up constantly. And when you do find a place that's safe, be it some sort of awe-inspiring view like in Primordia or Oblivia, or the mind-bending flora and fauna of Noctilum and Sylvalum, you just immerse yourself within that world. You take in those views, those moments of peace and quiet. It's the kind of experience I can only describe as being what it must feel like to go into the wilderness in real life, go off the grid, and then be at peace and one with nature, but I guess take that peace and replace it with a fight for survival, and that nature being replaced with the strangest, most interesting, most well thought out fictional ecologies in all of gaming. The wildlife and enemy designers for this game crafted one of the most fully realized fictional wildlife environments possibly in all of media, yes, including the Blue People avatar. The creativity and imagination never ceased to amaze, and during this time where I was getting a grip on my life all over again, those moments of peace really and truly did move me. Made me consider my place in the world, made me think about how I'm part of something bigger, made me think about what would happen if I was gone. Moments like those are what made me reconsider those decisions that I was facing about how to keep going forward. Oh, it's just a video game, one might say. But it's not, in my view. It is art. A work of profound art. Art is capable of moving us, of teaching us, of grounding our minds and our souls. This channel is a reflection of that belief. Yes, Xenoblade is that deep. It is that profound, and I fully intend on showing as much through the works that I will publish here going into the future. A video game, a work by Tetsuya Takahashi and his friends and peers on his team, saved the medium for me. Probably saved my life. No mere simple game could achieve that. I rose to the occasion. I was beginning to smile again. My soul, my crisis, was beginning to heal. Although a scar remains, a scar that will never fully fade away. No matter how tough I try to act today all about it, love has since poured into that wound. It took a work of profound art to realize that I wasn't beyond redemption. By mid-December, just north of a week and a half after I was playing the game, I was speaking with classmates again. They got me to watch that final Smash 4 reveal trailer with them on Skype. Hey, my vote was the winner. I was able to celebrate and to be excited about something again. Feelings that have been impossible to express just a month prior. I made it to Christmas Day, and I spent the day with Nana. Spent it talking about Xenoblade X, amongst other things. It was like things were back on track, and from there, life just went onwards. I carried that pain for so long, but I was able to let go and move on. I was not a monster. I was not a failure. I was just a kid way in over my head, carrying within him a struggle against depression, which will no doubt last the entire duration of my life, being made to play doctor with no experience in that field, forced to feign love that wasn't there, stressed out and hurt beyond reason for someone my age. By the end of the process, it'd taken its toll. There were bags under my eyes, my sleep was broken beyond repair, my weight had gone up, my grades were poor, and yet I was okay, so long as I got to play a little bit more X at the end of the day. I finished the main story sometime in January of 2016, and give or take 2/3 of a year, I had hit basically 100% completion. Basically, because there was like 99+% of mirror survey rate, and I couldn't figure out the rest. Of course, with a little bit of assistance from that not very good guidebook. I think I had north of 500 hours on the clock. I wouldn't trade any of those memories of that adventure for the world. I still had rough days, and I certainly wasn't healthy, but I was alive. And when those credits rolled, where most people would react with disgust or frustration, I looked towards the future with hype and excitement. When are we getting Xenoblade Chronicles Y? I wondered. And then surely a Z that will close out the trilogy. I turned what to other fans became a moment of disdain and turned it into nurturing roots, which would get my life into something resembling a track. I worked on my own game and story. I improved my grades in preparation of college. I secured friendships that would mean something. I learned new skills. I was probably going steady with Nana and making long plans revolving around that. And it all started with a small spark of joy. At the end of a long and dark tunnel, Xenoblade Chronicles X probably saved my life. I will remain forever grateful to Takahashi, to his team. Heck, I wasn't even mad when they announced Xenoblade 2 instead of X2 in 2017. I figured, at that point, they had earned my unconditional trust and that someday we'd all go back to Mirror again. I never once lost hope on that either. When it came to light that Xenoblade 1 DE was the 10th anniversary game, I instantly read between the lines and deduced that Mirror was in 2025. If I'm being honest, the future is a bit scary. Xenoblade X got by in the Xena community largely unscathed by drama and the daily grind of stupid hot takes because of its obscurity. Now that Xenoblade X is not only on the horizon about to meet a vastly larger community of players, but based on the early tracking information of web stats, XCXDE might very well be on the road to be the biggest title in the franchise. That is scary. I hope that the people who are about to play X will find within it what I found years back. And with the new elements, hopefully plenty of polish that'll improve the parts of the game that were frustrating on that first go around. Regardless of how the wider Xeno community reacts, I will continue to love and adore this game. It's not my favorite Xenoblade, obviously, but it's the one that probably helped me out the most. The wait is finally almost over, and make no mistakes, it was a very, very difficult wait. 10 years is an insane time to wait for, well, anything, honestly. I've been anxious for answers, but the main story had to go on. It culminated in the greatest climax to any story that I think I've experienced. So it was worth that wait. Now we can move into the future together, all of us in the Xeno community. We are finally ready to see what rests beyond the confines of that old Perfect Works story outline. Takahashi and his team are now too as free as birds. As free as Xenoblade X makes you feel. Free to do whatever wacky, fun, thought-provoking, moving ideas they may want to pursue. It's almost like by giving us these stories that we're able to engross ourselves with, we created a back-and-forth dialogue. I know I'm not the only one who's been enraptured by Xenoblade. In the same way, it's almost like Xenoblade's success has enraptured Monolith Soft itself, moving them beyond their darkest hours. I guess if I had to put a big bow on all of this, I'd say that life is a continual series of ups and downs that one must cross in order to go on. Today I'm healthier than I was when I was an idiot teenager, at least mentally. I'm medicated, now for my very clear and obvious depression. Going on 10 years steady with the love of my life, got a degree, and when the darkness returns, today I'm able to turn to my friends, the people who, long ago, I got motivated to connect with, to help me get on through. It's okay to ask for help. That was a very hard-ass thing I had to learn. Back then, I didn't do that. I thought that being grown meant that you just had to handle everything alone. Obviously, that was wrong, and I'm okay admitting that. I made mistakes. I have regrets, but it's okay. Just because you mess up once doesn't mean that you're incapable of improving or going on. You have to go on. It's your obligation to those who love you. Lean on to them if you need to. That obligation isn't something that you get to so easily walk away from. You have to fight. You have to fight for your right to exist because there isn't some sort of fantasy magical land that you can escape to here in the brutal world of reality, even if you wish that there could be. Thankfully, magic does exist within the confines of stories. Stories are our windows into another life, into a magical place. No one whose opinion ought to mean anything to you would judge you for enrapturing yourself within the magic of fiction, learning from it, growing because of it, taking a brief vacation in another world, and coming back to reality a more fulfilled individual. Obviously, you can't lose yourself within that process. Too much of an escape is just as bad as none at all. At the end of my journey with XCX, I had to get back up and I had to face reality. But the growth I underwent due to that game, that made it just a slight bit easier for a time. Remember, life does go on, with or without your input. That is true. Great stories can change lives. The fact that I'm here today is proof of that fact. The next video won't be nearly this personal, but Xenoblade X Definitive Edition was something that I've waited almost half my life for. If this was a story that was ever going to get told, it needed to be now. It's been a decade since this all happened. Now was the right time to tell my story. I'll see y'all again next up for my deep dive into Ontos, as well as the Xenoblade X Definitive Edition review. I'll see y'all then. Thanks.